Blood tasted like old copper pipes and regret. That was the last thing I knew. The sickening crunch of a Ford bumper against my ribs, the wet smack of my skull on the asphalt, and the high-pitched, mocking laughter of my little brother echoing from the sidewalk as his phone recorded the whole thing. I had lunged into traffic to pull him back from his ultimate kidnapping prank. I died so he could get 1,000,000 views. Then I blinked. The copper taste vanished, replaced instantly by the suffocating, buttery stench of mall pretzels and generic perfume. I stumbled forward, my sneakers squeaking against polished white tiles. The sudden rush of air into my lungs didn't come with the piercing agony of punctured organs. I dragged a hand down my chest. Solid. Unbroken. "Help! Somebody help me!" The scream was shrill, desperate, and entirely fake. I whipped my head around. The neon sign of an Auntie Anne's buzzed overhead. A few yards away, Toby was on his knees. He was 12 years old, wearing that oversized graphic tee he loved, tears already welling in his eyes. He had a gift for crying on command. His right hand was subtly angled, hiding his phone against a planter to capture the crowd's reaction. "He's not my brother! He's trying to take me!" Toby shrieked, pointing a trembling finger directly at me. A wave of vertigo hit me so hard, I had to grab the edge of a trash can. The plastic was sticky. It was real. I was back. It was exactly 3 months before the accident. In my previous life, this was the exact moment that started our downward spiral. I had panicked. I was terrified someone would actually call the cops on me, so I had rushed forward, grabbed his arm, and hissed at him to stop. I had clamped a hand over his mouth to silence his screaming. To the onlookers, I looked exactly like the monster he claimed I was. A mall security guard had tackled me. Mom had to come down, furious, and she blamed me for not handling my brother's playful phase with more patience. That day gave Toby the adrenaline rush he craved. It taught him that framing me was prime content. This time, my heart didn't race with panic. It slowed to a cold, dead thump. I looked at Toby. I looked at the 2 middle-aged women dropping their shopping bags, their faces twisting in horror. I looked at the teenager dropping his smoothie. I took 3 steps back. I crossed my arms, leaned against the faux brick pillar of a sneaker store, and just watched him. I didn't say a word. I didn't reach for him. I didn't defend myself. I just let my face go entirely blank, staring at him with the detached curiosity you'd reserve for a pigeon fighting over a French fry. Toby's performance faltered. He expected the struggle. He needed the struggle for the video. Without me pulling him, without me acting guilty or aggressive, he was just a kid screaming on the floor while a bored teenager watched from 10 feet away. I said, "Help!" Toby tried again, his voice cracking. He looked at the 2 women. "He's got a knife!" One of the women took a step toward me, clutching her purse. "Hey, what are you doing to that boy?" "Nothing," I said. My voice was calm, a little raspy. "I'm literally not touching him." "He's lying. He dragged me here," Toby wailed, thrashing on the tiles. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling, ignoring the scene entirely. The dissonance in the air was palpable. The crowd was confused. Usually, an abductor runs or fights or looks nervous. I looked like I was waiting for a delayed bus. "Are you his brother?" the other woman asked, her tone shifting from aggressive to uncertain. "Unfortunately," I said, not looking up from my screen, "his name is Toby. He's 12. He's recording you for a prank video. His phone is leaning against that fern." The women turned. They saw the black rectangle of the phone peeking out from the plastic greenery. The tension in the air shattered, replaced instantly by the sour, heavy mood of public embarrassment. "You little brat," the first woman snapped, her face flushing angry red. She scooped up her shopping bags. "People actually get kidnapped, you know. Sick." The crowd dispersed, muttering curses and rolling their eyes. Toby sat on the floor, the fake tears drying up instantly, replaced by a deep, ugly scowl. He snatched his phone from the planter and marched over to me. "You ruined it," he hissed. The smell of sour apple gum on his breath made my stomach turn. "Get up," I said softly. "You were supposed to grab me so it looked real," he complained, swiping angrily at his screen to delete the footage. I looked down at him. In the past, I saw a misguided kid who needed guidance. Now, All I saw was the bumper. I felt the phantom crunch of my ribs. A terrifying, liberating apathy settled over my shoulders like a heavy winter coat. "I'm not playing your game anymore, Toby," I said. "Cry wolf all you want. But when the wolf actually comes, don't look at me." He flipped me off. 10 minutes later, Mom emerged from the department store, her arms full of bags, smelling heavily of department store perfume and iced coffee. "Ready, boys?" she chirped. Caleb ruined my video. Toby whined immediately, slipping his hand into hers. He embarrassed me in front of everyone. Mom sighed, giving me that familiar look of exhausted disappointment. "Caleb, really? You know he wants to be a filmmaker. Can't you just play along for 5 minutes? It wouldn't kill you to be supportive." It literally did kill me, I thought. I smiled. It was a thin, brittle thing that didn't reach my eyes. "Sure, Mom. Next time I won't do a thing. I promise." Summer bled into August, thick and humid. The heat radiating off the suburban pavement smelled like hot tar and cut grass. The cicadas screamed in the trees, a constant grating soundtrack that perfectly matched the tension in our house. Toby didn't stop. If anything, my refusal to participate only made him double down. He needed an antagonist for his videos, and since I refused to be his villain, he started drafting the general public. It happened at the grocery store first. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow pallor over the produce aisle. I was pushing the cart. Mom was inspecting avocados. Toby was lagging behind. I heard the sharp intake of breath, then the shriek. "Get away from me! Don't touch me! Mom, help!" I turned around slowly. Toby had cornered an elderly man in a faded veteran's hat near the apples. The man looked absolutely terrified, holding his hands up in surrender as Toby backed away, weeping hysterically. "I don't know you! Let me go!" Toby screamed. Shoppers froze. A manager carrying a clipboard dropped it. Mom dropped her avocado and sprinted over, her face pale. "Toby! Oh my God, Toby!" She grabbed him, pulling him away from the confused old man. She turned to the veteran, her eyes blazing. "What did you do to him? I'll call the police." "Lady, I was just reaching for a Honeycrisp," the man stammered, his hands shaking. I didn't even look at the boy. I stood by the cart, staring at the condensation dripping down a jug of milk. My hands gripped the metal handle. A familiar, dark urge crawled up my throat, the urge to step in, to explain, to shield the innocent man, to expose Toby. That's what I did last time. I had yelled at Toby, defended the stranger, and Mom had grounded me for a month for taking a creeper's side over my own flesh and blood. I loosened my grip on the cart. I took a breath of the chilled, recycled air. I let it out. I did nothing. "He grabbed my shirt," Toby sobbed into Mom's shoulder. I saw his hand twitch. He was holding his phone by his hip, the red recording light pulsing like a tiny, mocking eye. The manager intervened. They checked the security cameras in the back office. 20 minutes later, Mom walked out, her face a rigid mask of humiliation, dragging Toby by the wrist. The cameras had shown the truth. The old man hadn't even been looking in Toby's direction. The ride home was dead silent. The smell of melting ice cream from the grocery bags filled the car. Mom gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. But when we got home, the punishment was a gentle scolding. "You can't do that, sweetie. It's not safe. People get the wrong idea." No consequences, no deleted account. Toby was back to posting by dinner time. By mid-August, Toby's face was infamous in our town. He pulled his kidnapped routine at the community pool, at the movie theater lobby, and outside the local library. He cried Trafficker so many times that his face ended up on the local community Facebook group, not as a victim, but as a public nuisance. "Watch out for this kid," one post read, accompanied by a blurry photo of Toby screaming in the park. "He fakes abductions for TikTok. Scared the life out of my wife yesterday. Don't engage." I watched the likes on that post climb into the hundreds. The town knew. The local cops knew. Even the neighborhood kids stopped hanging around him. Toby was isolating himself, building a prison of boy who cried wolf lies, brick by miserable brick. And I just watched. Sometimes, late at night, the guilt would gnaw at me. I would lie in the dark, listening to the muffled thumping of bass from Toby's room as he edited his videos. and I'd feel sick. He was my brother. Shouldn't I try harder? Shouldn't I break his phone? Or scream in Mom's face until she woke up to reality? But then I'd press my hand to my ribs. I'd remember the sound of the tires squealing. I'd remember the look on Toby's face when the car hit me, not horror, but shock that his content got interrupted. He had kept recording. That was the detail that haunted me. As I lay bleeding on the pavement, choking on my own blood, Toby hadn't dropped the phone. No, I wouldn't save him. You can't save someone who insists on drowning, especially when they plan to use your corpse as a raft. The problem for Toby was that his local audience dried up. He craved the chaotic, unscripted terror of strangers, and our town no longer provided it. People just ignored him now. If he screamed in the park, dog walkers just turned their headphones up. If he cried in the pharmacy, the cashiers just rolled their eyes. His views plummeted. His comments were full of people calling him out. He was getting desperate. He was pacing the house like a caged animal, muttering about algorithms and engagement drops. "We need a new location," he told me one morning at breakfast. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air. Dad was hiding behind a newspaper, oblivious to the world. Mom was wiping down the counter. "Who's we?" I asked, scraping butter across my toast. "You and me," Toby said, leaning across the table, his eyes wide and manic. "The county fair opens this weekend. 2 towns over. Nobody knows us there. It's perfect. Huge crowds. High tension." "I'm not going," I said flatly. "You have to. Mom won't let me go alone." Toby turned to her. "Right, Mom? Tell Caleb he has to take me." Mom sighed, tossing the dish rag into the sink. "Caleb, please, take your brother to the fair. It'll be good for you both to get out of the house. I'll give you $50 for food." "I'll take him," I said. I looked directly into Toby's eyes. They were bright with scheming, completely unaware of the dark gravity pulling us forward. "But whatever happens there, Toby, is on you. I'm not playing your games. I'm not stepping in." "I don't need you to step in," he scoffed, grinning. "I just need you to be the cameraman." I took a bite of my toast. It tasted like ash. I knew the fair. I remembered it from my past life. It was a chaotic, sprawling mess of cheap rides, flashing lights, and transient workers. It was loud. It was crowded. It was the absolute worst place for a kid to pretend he was in danger. Because in a place like that, when a kid screams, the real monsters pay attention. And this time, I wouldn't be standing in the monster's way. Dust coated the back of my throat with every breath. The county fair was a sensory assault of the worst kind, a sprawling carnival of rust and cheap thrills erected on a dying cornfield. The air was thick, suffocating. It smelled of diesel exhaust from the ride generators, frying oil, and the sour tang of spilled beer seeping into the dirt. I leaned against a chain-link fence near the ring toss, my boots sinking slightly into the mud. In my hand, my phone was raised, the camera locked on Toby. He was vibrating with nervous energy. The failure of his local stunts had made him desperate. He was wearing a bright yellow hoodie, perfect for standing out on camera, and his eyes were darting through the thick crowds, hunting for the perfect mark. "Keep it steady, Caleb," he hissed over his shoulder, his voice barely audible over the mechanical shrieks of the tilt-a-whirl and the thumping bass of awful pop music. "Don't mess this up. We need the crowd to surround me. You get their faces, I get the views." I didn't answer. I just adjusted my grip on the phone. My ribs gave a phantom twinge, a dull ache that radiated up my sternum. It was a reminder, a ghost scar. Toby spotted his target near the funnel cake stand. It was a bulky guy, with a thick beard and tattoos snaking up his neck, carrying a giant, neon-pink stuffed flamingo under one arm and holding a toddler's hand with the other. He looked intimidating but tired, the perfect contrast for Toby's victim routine. Toby took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and darted into the crowd. He intentionally bumped hard into the tattooed man's hip. The man stumbled, pulling his toddler close. "Whoa, careful there, buddy," he grunted, his voice unexpectedly soft. Toby didn't miss a beat. He dropped to the dirt like he'd been shot. He scrambled backward, scraping his palms against the peanut shells and cigarette butts littering the ground. "Don't touch me!" Toby screamed. It was his best performance yet. The shriek tore through the ambient noise of the fair, high and ragged. "I don't know you! Somebody help! He's trying to take me!" The tattooed man froze, his eyes going wide with pure, unfiltered panic. He threw his hands up, dropping the pink flamingo in the dirt. "Hey, man, I didn't touch you. I got my kid right here." A circle formed instantly. People stopped chewing their fried dough. A woman gasped, clutching her boyfriend's arm. The tension spiked, electric and sharp. Toby was nailing it. He was crying real tears, pulling his knees to his chest, looking like a cornered animal. He glanced quickly at me. A microscopic, triumphant smirk flashed across his wet face before he resumed his wailing. I stood completely still. I held the camera. I didn't look angry or scared or guilty. I looked dead inside. "Is that your kid?" A guy in a baseball cap yelled at the tattooed man, taking a threatening step forward. "No, I swear to God, he just ran into me," the man pleaded, sweating heavily now. I lowered the phone slightly. "It's a prank," I said. My voice was flat, carrying just enough over the murmurs. A few heads snapped toward me. "He does this for TikTok," I continued, pointing a lazy finger at Toby. "Search his handle. Toby the Prankster. He fakes kidnappings. He's been doing it all month." Toby's wailing hitched. His face flushed a dark, furious crimson. "He's lying. That guy is with him. They're both trying to take me." A teenage girl in the front row of the crowd pulled out her phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen. 3 seconds later, she snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Oh my God, he's right. I literally saw this kid on my For You page yesterday. He did the exact same thing at a grocery store." The atmosphere shattered. The heavy, protective tension evaporated, replaced by a collective, groaning disgust. "Are you kidding me?" the tattooed man muttered, picking up his dusty flamingo. He looked at Toby, shaking his head. "You sick little punk. You nearly gave me a heart attack." The crowd broke apart. People muttered curses, stepping over Toby as if he were a puddle of garbage. Nobody helped him up. Nobody offered a comforting hand. They just walked away, leaving him sitting in the dirt next to a spilled soda. I stopped recording and slipped the phone into my pocket. Toby scrambled up, brushing the dirt off his yellow hoodie. He stomped over to me, his fists clenched, his eyes blazing with genuine rage. He smelled like sweat and sour milk. "You ruined it again," he screamed, not caring who heard. "You purposely ruined it. You were supposed to just film. Why do you hate me so much?" I looked down at him. "I don't hate you, Toby. I just don't care." "You're a sociopath," he spat, kicking the chain link fence. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm a sociopath who isn't going to get arrested because of your stupid channel. I told you, I'm not stepping in. I'm not playing the villain, and I'm not playing the hero. You want to cry wolf? Go ahead." But the villagers are deaf now. He shoved past me, his shoulder clipping my arm. "I don't need you. I don't need anyone." He marched off toward the darker, less crowded edge of the fairgrounds, where the portable toilets and livestock trailers sat in the shadows. I didn't follow immediately. I bought a stale pretzel, chewed on the cardboard-like dough, and let him walk. Night completely swallowed the fairgrounds, turning the sky the color of a bruised plum. The cheerful, chaotic energy of the main concourse bled away back here. By the livestock tents, the neon lights barely reached, casting long, distorted shadows across the packed dirt. The cloying smell of powdered sugar gave way entirely to the sharp ammonia tang of pig pens and damp, rotting straw. I found Toby sulking on a splintered wooden bench beneath a single, flickering halogen bulb. He was hunched over his phone, his thumbs violently striking the screen. He was probably fighting a losing battle in his comment section. His yellow hoodie looked dingy under the harsh light. I stayed back. I pressed my shoulder against a stack of rough, scratchy hay bales, the stiff stalks poking through my flannel shirt. It was quiet here. The mechanical shrieks of the rides were just a muffled throb in the distance. That was when the man materialized from the dark. He didn't look like a predator. There was no trench coat, no menacing scar, no cinematic swagger. He wore a faded, oil-stained Carhartt jacket and scuffed work boots. His shoulders were slumped. He looked like a guy who had just clocked out of a 14-hour shift at a sheet metal factory. He smelled faintly of stale tobacco and wet asphalt. but his eyes were fixed on Toby with a dead, terrifying focus. He walked with a smooth, purposeful silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. My chest tightened. A cold, leaden weight dropped into my stomach. A sudden, violent surge of adrenaline kicked my heart against my ribs. Every hardwired older brother instinct flared to life. Move. Yell. Pick up a rock. Do something. Then I tasted it. Copper and old pennies. I felt the phantom, wet crunch of my skull hitting the pavement. I saw the flash of the Ford's grill. I remembered dying while Toby made sure the framing was right. My boots stayed planted in the dirt. I gripped the coarse twine, binding the hay bale until it cut into my palm. I breathed in the smell of manure. I watched. The man stopped inches from the bench. Toby, entirely absorbed in his digital war, didn't even look up. "Hey," the man said. His voice was a low, scraping rasp, like a shovel on concrete. Toby flinched, glancing up with an annoyed sneer. "What do you—" The man didn't let him finish. He moved with a sudden, explosive violence that completely shattered his tired worker facade. His left hand shot down, clamping over Toby's mouth and nose with terrifying force. His right hand grabbed the thick fabric of Toby's yellow hoodie at the chest, hauling the 12-year-old off the bench like he weighed absolutely nothing. Toby's phone slipped from his fingers. It hit the gravel with a sharp crack, the screen splintering into a spiderweb of dead pixels. Toby tried to scream, but it was muffled beneath the man's calloused palm. It came out as a wet, desperate gurgle. He kicked his sneakers wildly, heels scraping uselessly against the dirt. The man didn't flinch. He just spun Toby around, locking his arm across the boy's chest, and began dragging him toward a rusted blue cargo van parked in the deep shadows near the perimeter fence. A group of 4 teenagers strolled around the corner of the tent, passing a disposable vape back and forth. A thick cloud of synthetic watermelon smoke drifted into the cold air. The man froze, tightening his grip. He pressed Toby's back against his chest, trying to look casual in the dim light. Toby managed to wrench his mouth free for half a second. "Help!" he shrieked. It was a raw, ragged, ugly sound. It tore his vocal cords. There was no theatrical pitch to it. It was the sound of a kid realizing he was about to disappear forever. "Please! I don't know him." The teenager holding the vape paused. He squinted through the gloom. A slow, deeply cynical smirk spread across his face. "Oh, give it a rest, kid," the teen groaned, taking another hit. "We literally saw you pull this exact same garbage by the Ferris wheel 20 minutes ago." "Your acting is so cringe," one of the girls laughed, pulling her jacket tighter. They didn't even break their stride, their laughter blending into the distant thump of the carnival music. I watched Toby's face as the teenagers walked away. The halogen light caught his expression perfectly, the sheer, bottomless horror of realization. The script had finally burned. He had trained the world to ignore his dying screams. The man clamped his hand back over Toby's mouth and dragged him the rest of the way to the van. He popped the rear doors open. From my spot behind the hay, I finally stepped out. I didn't run. I walked to the edge of the light. As the man lifted him into the dark, cavernous back of the van, Toby's head whipped around. Through the gloom, across 50 feet of scattered gravel and garbage, his terrified eyes locked onto mine. He saw me. He knew I was there. He reached one trembling, dirt-stained hand toward me, his eyes wide and white, begging for the big brother who had always taken the hit. I stood perfectly still. I kept my face entirely blank, a mask of cold, unfeeling stone. I looked at him the way you look at a stranger on a subway. Toby's hand dropped. The plea died in his chest. The doors slammed shut with a heavy, metallic thud. The van's engine coughed to life, spitting a cloud of black exhaust into the night air. The tires spun, kicking up gravel as it sped toward the dirt access road, its taillights fading into the dark. I stood alone in the silence. I counted slowly in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I let the reality of it settle deep into my bones. At 10, I pulled my phone from my jeans. I swiped to the emergency keypad and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? A woman's voice crackled through the speaker. My brother was just abducted, I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of panic. Rusted blue cargo van. It just left the south access road of the county fairgrounds, heading west toward the state highway. The man was average height, wearing a brown jacket. I hung up. I walked over to the bench and picked up Toby's shattered phone, slipping it into my pocket. 2 hours later, the fluorescent lights of the county police precinct buzzed aggressively overhead. The waiting room smelled of industrial floor, cleaner, and stale sweat. Mom was hyperventilating in the corner, clutching a torn tissue. The heavy double doors swung inward. A state trooper walked out, guiding Toby by the shoulder. They had caught the van at a way station, 15 miles out. Toby was wrapped in a crinkling foil blanket. He looked tiny. His yellow hoodie was torn, his face smeared with dirt and dried tears. He didn't look like a prankster anymore. He looked like a kid who had looked directly into the abyss. Mom rushed him, sobbing hysterically, wrapping her arms around his shaking frame. Toby stood rigid, his arms hanging limp. Over Mom's heaving shoulder, Toby's eyes met mine. We stared at each other across the cold, bright room. There was no anger left in him, just a haunting, deeply broken clarity. He knew I had stood in the dark. He knew I had watched the monster take him. He knew I hadn't stepped in front of the bumper this time. I gave him one slow, deliberate nod. Toby squeezed his eyes shut, finally returning Mom's hug, weeping with the profound, terrifying knowledge that he was truly, finally on his own. Do you think Caleb went too far, or did Toby finally get the brutal reality check he deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves dark, twisty drama, and subscribe for more intense, original stories every week.